Migraines. If you've had one, that word touches something in you. It may shake you, it may irritate you, whatever your reaction is, it's different from someone else who's never had one. Now, most of society will tell you that migraines are a neurological disorder that cannot be healed and there's nothing you can do about them besides take meds when they happen and just walk through them the best you can. While that may be the case for many, many people these days, it is not the case for all of us. I want to share with you my story of conquering migraines and the steps that I took to help me come through the other side. I have had one in the past 5 years, and I'll tell you later why that one happened. But I want to tell you what I did to help my body heal and no longer experience those miserable moments, hours, days even. So let's break it down to some simple steps that you guys can take, because if I could do it, you can do it too. So one of the first things that I did, well, let me back up. Let's go back to when I first started to experience migraines. So I started getting them at about age 11, I believe. I did not write any of these details down. I'm just totally winging it. So here's my story. I believe it's around age 11. Pretty miserable. One of the first ones I for sure remember was at my grandmother's house. And I remember it must have been around the holidays because she had Bath and Body Works' Vanilla Bean Noel lotion. That was like one of her favorites. To this day, I cannot stand that smell because I associate that smell in memory with migraines. So even though I am well past them now, I cannot stand that smell. For other reasons, I don't use Bath and Body Works products at all. We'll get into that a little bit more down the road here, but I remember having them as a kid and they were miserable. Ended up in the doctor's office with my arms numb. She said, yeah, that's normal. These things happen. You know, here's this med, take it, go home. And it helped. Those meds helped. And I thought I had them conquered for quite a few years. And then I moved out, started working, like moved halfway across the country, not just moved out of my family's house, but moved from North Carolina to Minnesota. Thought I had them pretty well contained, ended up in a pretty stressful situation that I think started to trigger that for me. Also had a lot of just weak immunity in that same time period. Had some family things going on, was in the middle of planning a wedding, just a lot of things piling on at that moment. And I think my body just came to the point where I couldn't handle everything that was coming at me. And so my emotions weakened my body and the migraines started to return. So fast forward a little bit, ended up getting married. And then about 3 months after my husband and I got married, ended up in urgent care / the emergency room for a combination of 6 hours with the worst migraine I had ever experienced. Shaking uncontrollably from like shoulders to toes. My head even would just kind of tremor back and forth. I was throwing up often. My vision was just honestly so strange. I could not explain it to you if I tried. I remember some things looking like they were kind of in a kaleidoscope. I remember the light being awful, tunnel type vision sometimes, just so many things. It was very, very strange. I had had vision issues with migraines before, but this one was very different from anything I had ever experienced. Also felt horrible that it was the first one my husband ever experienced me have. Thankfully, we had moved back to North Carolina after he and I got married. My mom ended up being there. She had walked me through many of them as a kid. So even though it was my worst, it was really good that she was there to help me, but also I think to kind of help my husband through how to deal with it. But multiple times after pumping me full of 4 different medications, the doctor said, I don't know why this is happening and I don't know what to do about it. And that's no discredit to him. Migraines are something that the medical field will admit they don't really understand what causes them. Everyone has a different trigger or set of triggers. All sorts of things play into those. So after doing the best he knew how, they gave me the meds they had and sent me home after I finally stopped tremoring constantly. But it was at the point where my body would start to relax and then they would kick back in. So every time I would start to kind of feel better and hit what I figured was going to be a recovery stage, it would kick back in. So after 6 hours, they sent me home, and I stayed in bed for days, for months. Would get them on and off. The meds that they sent me home with did help, but the problem was it wasn't solving my root problem. Like, it was helping dumb down the symptoms, I guess, if you want to call it that, but it was not stopping them, and they were coming very frequently and with some pretty good intensity if I didn't get the meds in me quickly. So I was struggling because I was a new wife. I felt like I couldn't keep up with my home or my responsibilities as they might have been in the home. I remember many days being in so much pain, either my head or my body being so tense in the days after the migraines would end, that I would just stand in the kitchen and cry while I was making dinner or doing the dishes because the pain levels were that high. And my husband was very good about helping me around the home and through the pain and all those sorts of things. And he still, to this day, is very helpful that way. Thankfully, he doesn't have to help me because of those reasons, but he is just that type of person, and I'm very thankful for that. But it was a really, really hard season for me, especially. I know it was hard for him to watch, but it was especially hard for me because I felt like I was completely letting him down right off the bat after us getting married. So there was a lot of things emotionally and physically that I was working through at that time. And I went to multiple doctors trying to get some answers, figure out what's going on. I was offered multiple emotional medication for my mental state. I was not in a bad mental place. Like, I was discouraged and I was in pain, but I wasn't in a risky or depressed type state. I really don't understand why they offered those to me. Even the doctor, when he did offer them to me, didn't sound like this was really what I needed, but let me throw it out there. And I just was not comfortable with that. So I declined, did not go back to that doctor. Ended up walking into an urgent care for a cold that I could not get rid of because my body was so run down. And the girl that happened to walk in was the doctor, I should say, that walked in was a lady. And we got to talking. I told her I was there because I couldn't get rid of this cold, but we got to talking about the fact that I had had this migraine almost a year ago and was just having so many issues with recurring pain, and I had no energy and I felt dizzy often, couldn't regulate my body temperature, just so many strange things that were making life difficult. Like, I never knew what to expect. I felt like I couldn't make any kind of commitments or count on being able to do anything in a given day. And she said to me, she asked, are you on birth control? And has anyone mentioned to you that could be part of the problem? And I said, well, I just came off it because my husband and I were hoping to start a family. We had been married for a little over a year at that point. And I just wasn't sure what to think when she said that, but I had just come off it. And she said, okay, wait a little while, see what your body does. She goes, it can take up to a year for your body to really kind of rebalance things or adjust to the fact that you came off that medication. And I said, okay. But at least I felt like someone had given me a root cause for my problem and actually heard me. So I stayed off of that prescription. We were wanting to get pregnant anyway, so no big deal in that particular adjustment. Was doing somewhat better, but still needing the migraine meds because they would pop up here and there. And really, really wanted to just be done with all of that. So fast forward a little bit, my husband wanted to lose some weight, so we got onto a healthy eating plan. It wasn't a diet plan. It's called Trim Healthy Mama. Some of you may be familiar with it if you're in kind of the natural or just any health related type world. So started looking into their lifestyle of eating and that sort of thing. That's where we learned a lot about removing sugar from our diet and also focusing on making sure that there's protein in each meal. To be honest, I don't think about like, does my meal contain protein? I just use a lot of their recipes or the recipes from bloggers who eat that way and share recipes on their sites. So it seemed so overly complicated when we first got into it. I was very overwhelmed because I'm not comfortable in the kitchen at all. It's the one chore in life that I wish I did not have to do. But I like to eat because I don't like to be hungry, and I have a husband and now a toddler who also like to eat, so it's the chore that I do. But I felt very overwhelmed at first because it did seem very detailed and like you had to put a lot of extra thought into it. And I thought, oh, we're gonna have to like find all these weird ingredients and not eat all these foods, and that's not how it was at all. But as we got into it, I got more comfortable with it. I found recipes we liked. I worked up a meal plan that worked for us. And by meal plan, I mean just like I charted out a few weeks at a time, made coordinating shopping lists because that way it was done and it's less brain power I have to put into it every week. That's what I mean by meal plan. I don't mean like this crazy, detailed, these are my calories, whatever thing. So we started doing that. I started to feel a little bit better. I think mostly because we got the sugar out of our diet. And then at that point, it was later that year that I was introduced to essential oils. The girl who introduced me to them let me try a sample of one for a while, and she said, hey, this could help support your hormones, because I had told her, they told me that the birth control was causing my migraines. What can I do to try to get rid of some of these other issues? And she said, well, if it was hormone related, you probably need to focus on your hormones in general. So I started doing that. Also, she really sweetly and patiently taught me about getting chemicals out of our home and how those contain different chemical things that are xenoestrogens, which go into the body and mimic estrogen. So when that happens, that's also messing with hormones. So we got rid of those, and this was a step-by-step process over a good period of time. This wasn't like, oh, we switched our diet and then a week later we got oils and then a week after that we ditched chemicals. Like this was a journey that took us a good bit of time, between probably like 1 and 2 years, to really get all of these switches done. I don't honestly remember when they all happened. And then at that point, let me see if I'm getting all this right. So we ditched the chemicals somewhere in all of that. So we ordered oils at the end of 2017. I believe it was even before that, February of that year. Yes, February of that year, we started going to an upper cervical chiropractor. And it was one of those things where I was not willing to take that step yet. I had a chiropractor that I liked, and although getting adjusted with typical chiropractic was no longer really helping, it would kind of relieve my pain for about an hour after the visit, and then I'd be in pain again. I wasn't ready to jump into something I wasn't familiar with, and I was very nervous about letting another chiropractor mess with my neck. I have scoliosis, which is curvature of my spine. Some other things, I've fallen out of a swing and messed up my neck, not like drastically needing the ER or anything, but just dumb things as a kid. So all of those things combined, and the fact that I hate change and doing anything new, I was very hesitant to do it. And it was a good few months that our pastor kept saying, you should try this, you should try this. The chiropractor had helped his daughter get rid of migraines. And I was just like, I'm not ready for that step. I'm not okay with it. Jared had been in and out of some jobs by no fault of his own. So our finances weren't risky, but I really didn't feel like we should just be pouring out money on some new thing. I had so many things we had tried and people who were suggesting things that were going to be expensive to try, and I just wasn't comfortable with doing another thing and spending more money on me. And that was a mindset hurdle I had to work through, was that feeling of being unworthy of being healthy. I think I had gotten to the point where I was so down on myself because I was so sick and because we were spending money on me. And I felt like Jared and I had just got married and he was spending all his money. Like, that's how I was seeing it, was he was spending all his money on me. And I wasn't that like fairy tale brand new wife. And a lot of it, now that I look back, was mindset. And I just had no idea that that was even something blocking me there. And mindset is something that all of us work through every day, whether we realize that those are the stories that our brains are telling us or not. They're things that we have to work through. So finally, I was willing to just take the jump. I mean, my pastor literally just looked at me and said, the $1 million question is, why don't you try this? And I was like, okay. And you have to understand, I've known my pastor since I was 12. Like, my family moved here just before, well, just as I was moving into the youth department. So he was my youth pastor for 6 years. And then he took over the entire church when our other pastor retired a couple years after I graduated from high school. So I've known him for a really long time. So he had the relationship there to be able to look at me and say that. Anybody else, I probably would have been like, go away, leave me alone. I don't want to hear from you. But took his advice, went to this chiropractor. It's been 5 years, just like a week ago, that we started going there. And he's an upper cervical specialist. So he focuses on the atlas, which is the bone at the top of the spine, just below the base of the skull. So that very important area where all of our nerves run through. When that's off, the brain and nerves and things cannot communicate with the body like they should. So that really, really helped. And I love that style of chiropractic versus just typical chiropractic care. It's a lot more gentle. He does a lot more muscle work. Like he releases the muscles before he adjusts things, so that when he adjusts you, your body doesn't try to like immediately pull back. I mean, it still does because it was used to being cocked, however was wrong, excuse me. But it's in my opinion much better, and I have done a lot better and seen much more lasting results with it than I was with typical chiropractic care. So those are some of the things. The migraine that I have had in those 5 years was because I got into sugar without even thinking about it. I had gone to coffee with a friend on a Saturday morning, and then Jared had bought me some gluten-free cookies, and I don't think either of us really thought about the sugar content. We were just thinking gluten-free, Kristen can have them, not thinking about the other things that were in them, which is something that we're still learning and still walking through, is not just looking at a label and being like, oh, that's good for me because the label says so, but actually flipping it over and looking at the ingredients. But I ended up with a migraine because I had multiple cookies, because my self-control when there's something sweet in the house is like 0. So just being honest, I love sweet things. I just have to find them in a healthy alternative so I don't trash my body. But I'd had coffee, which had sugar and stuff in it, and didn't think about that at all. And then had the cookies, didn't think about that at all. And the combination of them in that short time period and in the amounts that I let myself consume them caused a migraine, and my body freaked out. It was like, what did you just do? We haven't done this. This isn't normal anymore. And it was not fun. I ended up at the chiropractor shortly after that, and I told him, I said I had a migraine. I said, but looking back, I think this is why, but I knew that the migraine had also messed with my alignment. So it was good to get back to him and get that fixed. But that is the one that I have had. So all that to say, the lifestyle changes that you make are huge. look at cleaning up your diet, look at getting those chemicals out of your house, look at balancing your hormones. All three of these things will benefit you in so many ways, whether you have migraines or not. And if this is not your trigger for a migraine, other things in your body will feel better if you do this. So what I'm trying to say is, even if this is not your exact trigger or magic fix, however you're looking at it, even though I don't think it's a magic fix, like you're giving your body what it needs and getting rid of what it doesn't. That's not a magic fix. It takes discipline, effort, those kind of things. But I know everybody's looking for like the fast way to fix it. But anyway, no matter how you're looking at this, if this is not the exact thing that stops migraines for you, your body will still benefit, and it will put your body in a better, healthy state to deal with those things when they do come up. Magnesium also is super helpful. It was not something that I implemented on purpose, but I have been implementing it more recently, not because of migraines, but just because I've learned that that is one of the most common deficiencies in our country. And I know now when my body is sending me a signal that I need it. And a lot of times that signal does come in the form of some type of pain in my head, or when I'm craving chocolate. Both of those can be a sign for me that I need magnesium. So I will still have the chocolate. I do like non-sugar chocolate that's sweetened with stevia. I will still have some, but I also make sure that I get a dose of magnesium before I get the chocolate, because if I don't do it before, then I've satisfied my craving and I forget about it and ignore it. So let's just be real. That's what I do. But I hope that some of these things were helpful. If you want some tips on how to do this, some product recommendations, supplement recommendations, oil recommendations, whatever you're looking for, I'd be happy to tell you about the things I used, again, to stay compliant and keep this up for you guys to hear. I'm not going to mention specific products, but I did use some very specific things in my journey and still do. And if you know me, you probably know where they're from, but feel free to reach out to me. I am always an email or text, Facebook message, however you know me and know how to get a hold of me. I'm happy to chat. I hope this was helpful, and I will be back next week to talk with you about whatever comes to mind.